Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. North Ridgeville City Council Committee of the Whole meeting is now in session. Today is Monday, April 7th, 2025. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Swink.
Here.
Schaefer.
Here.
Avens.
Here.
Winkle.
Here.
Awig.
Here.
DeVries.
Here.
Jacobs.
Here.
Mayor.
Also joining us from the administration this evening are Planning and Economic Development Director Kim Lieber and Assistant Fire Chief Mike Unack. Thank you both for being here. This meeting was called to discuss and to consider 2025-48. Clerk, could you please read the ordinance?
An ordinance creating a new Chapter 1470 Tenths of the North Ridgeville Building and Housing Code.
The ordinance was introduced by Mayor Corcoran, so I'd like to begin by allowing him an opportunity to provide any additional details and information. Mr. Mayor.
Sure. As I mentioned previously, this is a change that's being forced upon us by the state. It's just that simple. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Kim for some extra flavor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. President. By way of a little bit of background, earlier this year, Parks and Rec had reached out because they were updating their special event permit application. Every year they use this application as groups look to host events at our city parks. And so they're particularly looking for guidance in the area of additional requirements when it came to items like food trucks, tents, banners, signage. They wanted to make sure that they were coordinating the requirements of their application with the requirements of the building department. And this seemed like a really good time to convene building and the fire department, myself, to talk about what those requirements are, because basically the application just said contact the building department to see what they need. And this was kind of sending people, event organizers, around chasing their tail, trying to talk to too many different city officials. So we wound up having a meeting, and the timing seemed good because a new version of the Ohio Building Code had just come out in 2024. And so, and we were under the impression that a new version of the Ohio Fire Code was also going to be coming out. And we thought, well, this would be a really good time to just ensure that our city ordinances are all aligned with what the state requires. So as a little bit to our surprise, as we were reviewing the Ohio Building Code requirements, that we found that some changes to the language had occurred that indicates that for special event structures, tents, umbrellas, and other membrane structures erected on a temporary basis, that structures that cover an area greater than 120 square feet must go through approval from the building official process. So this was a change from what our common understanding was, that tents and such things below 400 square feet were exempt. Either tents under 400 square feet that were enclosed, or tents over or under 700 square feet that were open, we understood to be exempt. So this 120 square foot requirement was new to us and not really a welcome change in our mind. But nonetheless, the city's obligated as a certified building department to enforce the rules of the state of Ohio. So we wanted to put in place a process that would allow for the appropriate review and approval of tents. And we really didn't have anything in our local codes or ordinances addressing tents at all. We didn't have an application addressing tents. And so we, again, turned to some state guidance, reviewed some of the memos that the Board of Building Standards puts out. And one of the recommendations in their most recent guidance from May of last year was, to consider creating a separate application or a portion of application for plan approval to be used for temporary tents, really to focus on the kind of information that the city would be looking for in order to approve those applications. So we felt like we really need to create a separate application, because temporary tents are very different than other types of permanent structures, than buildings or parking lots or sewer taps. And then we also then needed to create a little bit of a process to guide those who are looking to install or erect tents or membrane structures, which is the origin of Chapter 1470, which would be a building code chapter. And we tried to keep it as streamlined as possible, not to be overly redundant of the state building code, but just indicating that permit is required. So how the building official grants approval under the Ohio Building Code is for the city to issue a permit. So that is the practical way that the city grants approval. So, and we do that by taking an application with the required information, reviewing it, comparing it to local codes, addressing any safety issues, circulating it to fire, and then meets all requirements, then issuing the permit. We added some additional requirements in here that were suggested by the fire department. Cooking is a great concern under tents when there's an open flame, so we wanted to make clear. We also wanted to just reiterate that the materials needed to be non-flammable and that these tents can't be placed in a location as to obstruct traffic or pedestrian circulation. We also include exemptions for, recreational camping, tents less than 400 square feet accessory to a residential dwelling are also exempt. And I guess just last, I would say that, we continue to hope that the state fire code will be released that might contain some additional regulations. And at that point, we might need to review the building code with the fire code and our local ordinance to make sure that they're all saying the same thing. And we also continue to have conversations with the Board of Building Standards because we feel like the change from 400 square feet to 120 seems kind of onerous, but yet we must still follow the state building code. We're targeting, this commercial properties that have special events or those that use city properties for special events. I don't know if there's anything to add on the fire side.
No, it's challenging because the fire code and the building code come out together, and for whatever reason, the building code came out last year, and we're still waiting on the fire code. So that brings up many levels of concern because what is removed from the building code gets thrown into the fire code. So I'm just waiting to see what we're gonna get bombarded with as far as the fire code is concerned. My big concern that really brought this to attention to me was the corn festival with all the tents that we had and pretty much eliminated all but the kettle corn tent. So to cook underneath a tent, the appliances have to be approved by the building official and the fire marshal. Well, that red flag was brought up to our law department, and they didn't feel it was a very good idea for us to select what appliance we were going to allow on the street, which is leaving the city up for liability. So if something happens to that appliance, it's like a fryer, and it tips over and hurts somebody, and we allowed it, that leaves us, could be liable for that too. So we just need to wait on the fire code. I think hopefully it's not anything new than what the fire code already addresses. And with regard to tents, the fire code really hits pretty much everything. Building code is just a minor picture of what the tent regulations are. It's all in the fire code. So Kim pretty much covered it all. So
Okay.
Somebody has a friend that makes kettle corn, which is why there's an exemption for kettle corn under tents. Doesn't
Okay.
make any sense at all.
this is the weird part too. So like for festivals, it's the Department of Agriculture, and do not tread on the Department of Agriculture. They want festivals. Festivals have essentially their own rules as far as like mobile food trucks to everybody else. So one of our mobile food vendors that does the kettle corns called the state fire marshal's office and got an exemption through them. So, and again, they use minimal amount of oil. It's so minimal, but they're a festival that can do a lot of things that nobody else can do. So.
Okay, thank you all for the additional information. I do have an initial question regarding the exemption. So Kim, you had mentioned that there's an exemption for tents used exclusively for recreational camping purposes, as well as those that are accessory to a residential dwelling. So essentially that means if it's under 400 square feet and on private property where there is a home, essentially, then this rule does not apply. You do not need a permit in that case.
Correct.
Okay. So that would include, in most cases, graduation tents and tents for weddings and those kind of things, as long as they're under 400 square feet.
Yes.
Okay. And the permit fee, I believe is it $25? Is that what the fee is? The amount?
Under 400, I think when you hit 400, then stamp drawings are required, and that's when an additional level of review because of the size, so that is a higher fee.
Okay. And then 1470-03, the additional requirements. Does those additional requirements apply for any and all tents, or only those requiring a permit? The duration,
Well-
the material, the cooking.
I guess, duration would be for those that require permit. Material, I don't know how fire would review if there's an exempt tent, but it wasn't.
Yeah, so, like the 400 square feet, over 400 square feet, if there's sidewalls, affixed to the tent, you have to have a permit for that. The exemption is for open wall, 400 square feet, open wall, and you can actually go up to 700 square feet without sides. That's the weird language in the fire code. But as far as, anything smaller that doesn't need a permit, I mean, I think it just is what it is. I mean, we're not reviewing it.
Right.
I mean, so how are we gonna even know?
Sure.
So,
Okay, so that said, I guess, do we need an amendment to specify sidewalls versus no sidewalls?
I would leave that out because it's so fire code specific, and again, it's one of those areas we don't know if it will change or not change.
Okay.
and the reason why they had that for sidewalls is because now you have exits, now you have occupancy load where you're going into emergency lighting, emergency exits,
Mm.
panic. I mean, it's very specific for safety reasons. So that's, that is really why you would have them submit plans to make sure they're complying with the egress of the tent.
Okay. Do any other council members have any questions regarding this legislation?
I have a question.
Mrs. Awig?
So with the sidewalls, does that pertain to private property as well, for like a graduation party or something, or not? What you're talking about?
That's how it's written.
Well, I guess you can look at it as, are they renting these from a commercial business? It's such it's so challenging. I don't know how, we don't have the manpower to police it. That's what's gonna be the challenging part. I would say more commercial use, in my opinion. We're talking commercial. I don't
But
know.
you're not concerned if it's at a private
Well,
residence with the sidewalls?
Private property.
As the fire marshal, he's always concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. But how do you police that?
Yeah.
That part I don't know. I guess that's the challenging part.
Right.
How far we wanna go.
And it doesn't pertain to tents at the Corn Festival, or it does? I was kind of confused on that.
It does pertain to the tents at the Corn Festival. We have gotten rid of my concern has always been with the cooking tents, not, the other tents are all compliant. I mean, they're all open walled and I have no issue with any of the other tents. The reason why the tents that were on the main drag is they're all on top of food trucks, on top of tents, all the way down Bainbridge. And if one caught on fire, they would all catch on fire.
So they will have to pay the extra $25 or $50?
I mean, that's,
In accordance with the current regulation, any tent erected would either need to pay the $25 fee or the higher fee depending on the size. So what we didn't want to do with this ordinance is start picking out who pays what based upon if you're part of a festival or a community group or a local business. So there'll probably need to be an internal discussion, I would say, about events that are big like the Corn Festival or other, where there's many tents and many participants, about one, how to ensure that we are getting the information we need to issue approvals, and then what an appropriate fee might be, and whether that's part of an MOU that we execute with the event organizer, or whether each individual end user is responsible for securing their own permit, if fee waivers might be appropriate given the scope of an event. So I think those are issues that we can't possibly legislate every type of event, but we are sensitive to that. Also, we're sensitive to Victory Park and how many rotating events they have there as well.
Right.
So, whether that comes back to you in some other legislative form or comes to you in the form of, you get a notice from the mayor's office that, you know, he's granted a fee waiver for a community event, I don't know, but, it just didn't seem possible to list every eventuality in the ordinance. But there's a substantial amount of work that goes on between the building department and the fire department when reviewing these tent installations, especially when they involve cooking or electrical connections. There are plan reviews, and there's inspections, and, you know, at sometimes all times of the day and evening and weekend as well. So there's a lot of investment on city personnel side. So it did seem appropriate to attach some kind of a fee to the review of tents. And because if they're installed incorrectly, the danger to the community is great.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any
Through the chair.
questions? Yes, Mrs. Swank?
I have an issue because it says all tents over 120 square feet erected on private property or public property. And then at the bottom, it says that the violation shall constitute a minor misdemeanor. How do you spread the word to the community that if you're gonna have a 400 square foot tent in your backyard to host a wedding, you have to have a permit? I mean, they can come in and say, I didn't know that. Now they're being charged with a misdemeanor?
Well, we will certainly need to use all of the tools that we have to inform the community, including it in any special event permit package, sending it to all the vendors and those that we know participate in our community events, city newsletters, HOA communications. But again, we're not permitting things in people's backyards. This is meant to be a commercial application or for city property. So we're not going to be issuing permits for the graduation party in your backyard that's in an under 400 square foot tent, or you have multiple tents that are, you know, separate, that, like, those will not require a permit.
So,
But-
and, well, not to pick on 8820, but say 8820 being a commercial, like, if they wanted to erect a 400-foot tent, they would have to do this?
Yes.
Okay.
And so that it's greater than 400. So it's greater than a 20 by 20 tent. And anybody, we've all gone to graduate. 20 by 20 tent is the common size tent that you see all over the place.
Mhm.
At these parties, at people's homes. Technically, it's greater than that. It's not that, 400 square foot, so
Okay.
that's why I'm reading it.
Well, that's in your fire code, that's not in the building code. So,
It actually tells you that it's 400.
well, that's the threshold for the stamp drawings is 400 for building.
Oh, yeah.
This is the difficulty we have in meshing, again, building code and fire code that are a little out of step at the moment.
I was just under the impression that
But again, this is a focus on commercial properties and for events on city parks, not for individual homeowner activities.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions or comments from members of council?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Reed?
I guess my area of concern is like the Corn Festival, and this is more of a comment than a question. You have all those tents, will that mean individual permits will have to be taken out and then reviewed? Or somehow or other, will we accommodate the Corn Festival and try and lump it all in one application?
I would prefer to not have to deal with all the individual, but to use the event organizer as the shepherding force to assist, to pass down the information to their vendors, because they will be engaging with every vendor who is there, and they will have the list of every vendor and can share our requirements. So that's one of those areas where I think it makes sense to talk about. We have an MOU with the Corn Festival Committee about maybe amending or adding something about this requirement in that document.
And along those lines, I do know that each tent is inspected by either a building official or a fire official to make sure that they are safe in that. So it's just a matter of I don't think we've determined whether we're going to have each individual fender apply or whether we're just gonna put it under one umbrella. It's, again, just a comment or a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Abens. Are there any additional comments or questions? Mr. Winkle?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just had a quick question. I know you said the intent was not to deal with people, graduation parties or whatever. Are we concerned with language on 1470-02A where it says approvals required for all tents over 120 square feet erected on private property? It literally says that.
Correct.
Maybe,
And then
But there, B also says there's an exemption if it's less than 400 square feet and accessory to a residential dwelling. So I mean, I guess if you read it in its entirety, then
I understand.
it's just
what
my
you're
2
saying.
cents. I don't know. I mean,
I
you
just
could
know
go ahead and
how-
answer.
I just know how interpretations come across my desk sometimes where it says 1470-02A says you can't do this. So, I don't know, I like things are black and white, so otherwise every single graduation party in town will have an issue. That's, I guess, a suggestion maybe to clarify what might be something I would mention there. And then a comment based on what Bruce said, and I think Georgia, if we're going to, maybe you have special event permits doing Corn Fest and things like that, maybe it's as simple as putting something in a special event permit saying you have to satisfy 1470 during your event, and maybe that's, just as a comment, so. That's all I got.
I suppose maybe one option would be to change section A to say over 120 square feet erected on private property unless otherwise exempted under section B below, along those lines.
Good reference at least. So.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be nitpicky, I just know that what I deal with, so.
Sure. Are there any additional comments or questions at this time?
To the chair, I have one question.
Mr. Schaefer?
I noticed the word temporary appears here quite a bit. Do we have a definition of what temporary means in terms of duration? Like, because I go down Brook Park Road and there's all these tents. At the end of the day, they tear them down and the next day they put them back up. So is that two different permits or is there like?
temporary, Mr. President, temporary under the building code is less than 180 days.
Wow.
That's how it's defined in the building code.
But it also states here, under additional requirements, the duration, no tent may be erected for a period longer than 30 consecutive days.
Right, local requirement.
So essentially, they could have it up for 30 days, and if they took it down for one day, they could put it back up the next day, but they'd need a new permit, is the way I would understand that. Yeah, okay. Any additional comments, questions?
Mr. President?
Mr. Abens?
One other question. Many of our residents have what is called a sunshade that rolls out from the edge of your house. Is that a tent?
Like a awning?
It's like an awning, but it rolls in and out. It's
That's
made of
I would say
material.
if it was attached to the structure, then this is not considered temporary structure. It's part of the permanent structure. So
Okay.
that would have been reviewed as part of the installation or the permit for the house.
Yeah, I have to admit, I don't know if those things need a permit or not.
Through the chair.
Mrs. Swink?
I agree with Councilman Winkle. I think A needs a little bit more specification because it is open to interpretation. And the thing that gets me is a violation of this section shall constitute a minor misdemeanor. That's where I think it needs a little tweaking.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Additional comments or questions?
Mr. President, would you like me to circulate an amended version back to council for your review?
I think that would be helpful, yeah. Thank you. So I guess at this time, if there's anybody in the audience who would like to address council regarding this particular ordinance, we ask you to please speak from the podium. Okay, seeing none. At this time, I will entertain a motion to send 2025-48 back to council for further consideration. The motion was made by Jacobs and seconded by Swank to send 2025-48 back to council for further consideration. Are there any final comments or questions at this time? Okay, clerk, please call the roll.
Swank,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Avens,
Yes.
Winkle,
Yes.
Awig,
Yes,
DeVries,
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, with no further business before the committee this evening, the meeting is adjourned.